should I say. Oh, good.
But
also, it's been nice having a bit of the weather change as well. I don't know about everybody on the call, but it definitely feels like, you know, spring is here, and a bit of light at the end of the tunnel just lifts everybody's mood a little bit as well, which is really nice actually. So I'm looking forward to more meetings in person, and yeah, that's definitely the next thing to look forward to, I think.
Yeah. Shouldn't be long now.
No.
Oh,
It's illegal to have a coffee with someone.
Good morning. How are you, Alpesh?
very well, very well.
Good, good.
Back up and running.
Good. Good news about the book as well. Good job.
Yes, yeah, that was random, and Penguin obviously just emailed us, so I emailed it out. But yeah, that's really good. And then Grace is having a catch up next week with them,
Cool.
which is good. And she's just got the first video as well, so I think she can share the video on Monday with you as well.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. So I'm just going to wait for a couple of minutes because we've still got lots of people joining. So Friday morning, it's hard to be dead on time on Friday mornings, but we'll start in a couple of minutes.
David, do you want me to put it on mute?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Morning, Ben.
Morning.
Lots of people haven't done their hair yet because they're all on audio only.
I don't blame them. I don't blame them. When a hairdresser's opening up, Joe, there's nothing wrong with your hair. Before
I've already messaged my
that.
hairdresser, but I have no response. So
I think my wife's got a countdown calendar for it. So
I think it might be Boots and L'Oreal again.
Oh really? Well, my eldest son is now cutting his own hair, so which is interesting. So he looks something like that. I think is it Harry, the guy off Dumb and Dumber? It's like a bowl head. It looks really, really bad. But he seems happy that he's in control. So never mind.
I think the people that produce advent calendars have missed a trick because they could have done a countdown calendar, couldn't they?
I know. Can you imagine?
No. It isn't shampoo in it, right? Would have been great.
How are we looking, David? Are we close?
Yeah, I think let's kick off. I think we've got some more people coming in, but let's kick off because it's time to start. So I'm just going to mute everybody. There you go. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Mastery series. So what this is all about is learning the sort of 6 key areas of business mastery. Now we've done marketing and we've done sales. So today it's all about team mastery. And then we're going to go on to financial mastery. The financial mastery webinar is on April 23rd. So put that one in your calendar. And then after that, we'll go on to self-mastery and customer mastery to finish the whole series. So the format of today is we're going to do some presentation stuff, some learning stuff, and then there'll be an opportunity for a discussion. There'll be plenty of opportunity for you to ask questions. So we've got at least 20 minutes set out for asking questions. So if you think of a question, put it in the chat box and we will definitely answer the majority of questions. We normally get around most of you. But before we start, obviously a warm welcome from the Henley Coaching Partnership, which is myself, Joe Bentley and Chris. Joe, do you want to say good morning?
Morning, everyone.
And Chris, good morning.
Good morning, David.
And today we're really lucky to have a special guest with us, Nick Mouncey. Nick, thank you so much for joining us and good morning.
Good morning, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so without further ado, let's get on and address the subject of team mastery. This is all about how to create high performance teams. And we're really lucky to have Chris and Nick with us, 2 real experts in creating and working in high performance teams. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Chris. Chris, they're all yours.
David, thank you so much. Listen, welcome everybody. Really excited to be able to join you today and talk about high performance teams, and we'll introduce Nick very shortly as well. For those of you who don't know me, just a couple of minutes background on myself. Spent 15 years in the military, predominantly in people development. So that's the area I specialized in. I looked after the leadership school, so the military leadership school, for about 2.5 years, educating around 2,000 people a year across 5 leadership development programs. I operated down at Headley Court, which is our national rehabilitation centre for the wounded, injured and sick. So looked after people development and all of the people element of the divisions down there, which was incredibly fascinating, seeing how these teams came together, very dysfunctional at the start, to work together to produce this incredible recovery process for men and women that have been wounded at war. And then spent about 18 months in the United States working on the Invictus games, and another incredible opportunity working with the White House, the Royal Household, the Bush Institute. And I looked after 15 different nations to bring together this incredible world-class experience at Disney, at a Disney resort, which was, I guess, something I'll always look back with fond memories. I now head up something which is called the Rugby Centurions. I'm the chief executive of the Rugby Centurions, which celebrates those men and women who have 100 international test caps or more for the country, 77 across the globe, 23 World Cup winners from 13 nations. So it's been incredible to hear through our podcast the stories around how they've created successful, high-performing teams that have sustained the distance, multiple World Cup winners. But really excited today to have Nick Mouncey with us, who I've worked with previously in the military. He's a specialist fighter controller, and we're going to deep dive into some of the tools and tactics that he utilizes in some really disrupted space and in, I guess, a complex environment as well, to deliver the best results. So I guess the first question that I want to pose today, just as we go through, is, has the criteria for high performance teams changed? Well, look, we believe at the Henley Coaching Partnership that the criteria has not changed, but the landscape in terms of where we're operating has. So you'll have seen over the last 12 months, you'll have experienced it. It's more disruptive, it's more complex, and it's definitely uncertain. It is also now very much digitalized. You know, in the future, or we always thought it was going to be much more thing of the future, but it's actually happening now. So if you're ahead of the game with the technology and the digitalization, you're going to be in a much stronger place. And we're also operating at distance. You'd have found the ways of working with your team and how you interact with your stakeholders and your immediate team has fundamentally changed. And that's why I'm really excited to have Nick with us today, because he operates in this space and has been doing so for a number of decades. So what are you going to get out of today? We're going to share with you our model, so our high performance team model, and you're going to walk away with 3 actionable points to enable you to continue to build that high performance environment. Before we get into the model itself, I think it's a great moment just in the call to introduce Nick. Nick, firstly, a very, very warm welcome. And it'd be great, firstly, give us a bit of background into your career, what you've been up to. And if you could explain to me at some point how this diagram and slide works, that would be extremely appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Good morning, everybody. As I've already said, thanks for inviting me. Anytime you invite a military guy to talk about his experiences, you're lucky if it's probably under 3 or 4 hours, never mind the short time we've got. But my background, as Chris has already said, is fighter control. It's now known as the Air Operations Branch. And I've specialised in command and control for over 20 years now. So I left back in 2014, and kind of the landscape changed for us quite markedly in the military around 9/11, really. So in my early days in the military, we were pretty singular in focus. It was kind of Cold War, Russian facing threats. And then 9/11, everything changed. We needed to adapt really quickly to new emerging threats and become more agile, more open and adaptable to the way we're going to operate. And it was obvious at that point that everything we were going to do was going to be at range or at distance. So my background here, really, in this diagram that Chris has got, I kind of sit in the middle of all of it, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But in terms of what I've done, post 9/11 is where it kind of really all happened for us. I've got a lot of experience in Afghanistan, both airborne and in the ground. Airborne in the back of the E3D, which you may just be able to see over my shoulder, which is an airborne command and control platform, which is designed to operate at range and has got a whole host of communication links and reach back to higher authority and command. And we sit in the back of there and control vast battle spaces in excess of hundreds and hundreds, or if not thousands of square miles. Intents delivered to us, and then we perform that to the best of our ability into the changing environment. So I spent 4 months on the ground in Helmand Province as the tactical director, responsible for all the aircraft operating over Helmand Province and ensuring they operated safely and delivered air effects on the ground to support the army. I did that airborne. I flew 20 missions over Afghanistan doing that in the back of the aeroplane, as I've already mentioned. I flew 64 combat missions over Libya, where I was responsible for the entire battle space of Libya, which was pretty much the entire length of the east coast of the UK. In terms of, to give you some context, I was responsible for everything that happened within that area. And I've also done some other stuff more recent, just before I left, with looking after Cyprus and stuff as the Syria Operation Herrick stuff kicked off. In and around all of that, I've spent 2 years at a place called CRC Scampton, which is in Lincolnshire, which is a command and reporting centre where I was responsible for UK air defence, specifically quick reaction alert force and scrambling QRA to various threats that may enter UK airspace. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So in terms of the diagram in front of you, as I've already said, we sit in the middle of that, and kind of the computer and the satellite is the bit where we're operating at distance. So when we're airborne, our tasking, our reach back comes in via both of those means primarily. So utilizing satellite communications, you know, it sounds fancy, but it's probably no different really to a kind of mobile telephone, if you like, but it just operates over huge ranges. And actually, most modern warfare now is done by laptop in a very kind of open architecture, Windows-based system, chat rooms, if you like. And that's where a lot of our reach back happens. And that's great as well. And it's pretty easy, but it takes time, it's problematic. And often the connectivity is not great. So you're often relied to take command of certain situations and use your own training and instincts to deliver effects for the other three things you can see on that slide. So they're effectively my customers, if you like. I'm airborne to make sure they can deliver the right effects where they need to, both in the land environment for the army, the maritime environment for the Navy, and obviously airborne for all the aircraft we're supporting as well. So we are multi-domain, cross-domain, at distance from higher authority and trusted to deliver the right effects as we're asked to do by higher command. So it's pretty challenging. It's multi-nation as well. So there's a multitude of language sets in there, which obviously provides problems as well when you're communicating, and we'll probably talk about some of those things later on as well. But yeah, is that all right, Chris?
Perfect summary, Nick. And I think it's really interesting. We could actually overlay this. I'm just thinking from a business owner's perspective. You know, a business owner can actually sit very much in this middle domain when they have their customers, their stakeholders, their suppliers, potential shareholders, board of directors, and they are the conduit between all of it. And I think one of the key bits you took on there was communication, which I know we're going to explore briefly in a minute. And the model that we're going to utilize today to look at in terms of what drives high performance is three key components. So firstly is the leadership, and obviously that for us is about setting the vision and direction, and we'll get Nick to explore some of this in terms of how he leads in this very complex and uncertain environment that he does. We then have what we call our management. So it's all about, can we see performance clearly? Because we've got to be able to manage performance to do something about it. So what measures are you putting in place as a leader and as a business owner to manage and get the best out of your teams? Because teams is everything. We can't do anything without the people around us. And then also our coaching. So with another slightly different hat on, how are we creating future capability in the people and also your business? We've spoke, I think, quite a bit on some of our masterclasses around this concept of working on the business and not in it. And that coaching around creating future capability is just that. Now, the R rate in the middle is driven by relationships. So we believe and strongly believe at the Handy Coaching Partnership that everything is driven by relationships. Firstly, as a leadership perspective, so you've got to be able to create those right relationships with stakeholders, board of directors, shareholders, suppliers, customers, clients, your immediate team. You've then got to be able to manage performance. You've got to create that trust. Again, that comes down to creating that right relationship in order to be able to do that. And that, again, links straight back into the coach. And again, you need to be able to create the right relationship with your people at all levels within your business in order to challenge them to get out of their comfort zone and get to the next level. So first thing we're going to look at is leadership. Three elements that Nick and I have come up with, which has been pertinent, I think, to Nick's career in the military, but also what I've experienced from both corporate, sport, not-for-profit, and the military as well, is three clear components. Alignment and clarity of vision, emotionally connected, and we're going to explain a little bit of that in a minute. How important it is to create communication, seamless communication throughout your business, and fast and agile decision making. Nick, plenty of missions. I mean, I'm amazed you can keep count of them. I'm expecting there's a tally chart somewhere, maybe in the downstairs loo or something. But alignment and clarity of vision and that emotionally connected piece. How important is that for you in the area that you're operating in?
I mean, alignment and clarity of vision is huge. You know, we are a 10-man team in the back of that aeroplane, responsible for hundreds of aeroplanes and thousands of miles of airspace. So it's important that we step to the aeroplane to do the mission with everyone aligned with a singular focus on what we're going to achieve, understanding what's required of each individual, and what part you play within that team. Okay, so we all need to have a clear vision of what's expected of us. And as the leader or the manager of that team, it's down to me to ensure we stay focused throughout that vision as well, because you know everyone's heard of the fog of war. Okay, that quickly descends in some situations, and you need to stay focused and you need to be aligned and make sure you know exactly what you're there to do. The emotionally connected part of that is a really interesting subject, really, because when we train for events, you often don't feel that emotional connection because you understand that it's training and it's a safe environment. And safe environments are important to develop people. I really believe that. But actually in operations, certainly in Afghanistan, we were responsible for delivering air effects onto the ground in Afghanistan. And the outcome of that was to support the soldiers and to get the injured soldiers back to a safe place where the hospital was. And that hospital was actually about 100 meters behind where we were sat, delivering our air effects, and the helipad was actually in between us and the hospital. So we saw direct effect of what would happen if we weren't clear in our vision, we weren't aligned to create a singular outcome, and actually you felt incredibly emotionally responsible for what was going on. And that actually is a great thing in some respects because it focuses the team and it allows you to have a sense of purpose, and the individuals have a sense of purpose because what they're doing it matters. It really matters. If we don't get the guys back to the hospital quick enough, and that would be down to us allowing aircraft safe passage, quick passage to get to where they need to be. So both of those, all of those things are massive.
You know, Nick, on that point, would you say when the team is emotionally connected and you felt it as a leader, when you can connect your people to the output, there's a noticeable difference in performance?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a huge increase in performance. I think, you know, we operate in an operations room, and it's typically a noisy environment. But when these things, you're emotionally connected and it's a particularly serious thing, you tend to find that the noise levels go down. Everybody's focused and they are driven in a single direction to achieve a really successful outcome, or as best outcome as you can in those situations.
No, that makes sense. We often talk, I think, you know, communication, everybody talks about communication. And what we found actually working with some of our clients and some of the businesses, actually, the business owners or leaders can have the best plans, the best vision of what their output's going to be, where their business is going to go. But the challenge sometimes it tends to stay between the two ears, and we don't disseminate that communication throughout the entire part of the business. I think when you look back at your career, Nick, I mean, have you got an example maybe where communication, maybe it's gone wrong within that sort of leadership role and what effect that's then had?
Yeah, I mean, I've got one that's a bit more lighthearted than what I was just talking about. I mean, certainly in the early days of Afghanistan, and this is two countries split by a common language, we had a task come into the aeroplane, which was to do a reconnaissance roll down a stretch of effectively kind of motorway in Afghanistan, and we chose to give it the task to an American asset. And the reconnaissance, you know, is a long word, right? We try and cut everything down in the military to make communication slick and easy, and it comes down to, we just call it recce. And we got the aircraft onto the frequency, so we've got a new task for you. We want you to do some recce between point A and point B down this stretch of motorway. Exactly. Okay, got it. Off he went, did his task, came back, said, "Sir, I've wrecked the road." I said, "Sorry?" He said, "Yeah, I've wrecked the road. I've dropped 34 bombs between point A and point B. I've completely destroyed it." And the comment, what we used as recce for reconnaissance, he took as wreck and completely destroyed the entire stretch of motorway in Afghanistan. You know, and to us that we were clear in our communication, we're clear in our intent, but actually for those guys, they just completely misunderstood what we meant. And that's a little bit light-hearted. No one was injured. There's nothing bad about it, but it demonstrates to us that we have to be completely clear in what we do. And certainly, you know, flying around working with multinational air forces, what you tend to find is that sometimes they just don't understand what you mean. And I think this is important in business as well, that you have to be clear in what you're asking people to do or stating your requirements, whatever they are. And if they don't understand, simply don't repeat the question, because we find that a lot in the air environment. The guy will be like, I don't understand what you're saying to me, so we'll just repeat the question. And we keep repeating the question. And actually, you need to rephrase it or rebrand it or change it, because actually, if they don't understand, you won't get what you want out of them.
So it's about changing your communication style to get, so it's almost like the person receiving it is getting the right type of language so that you can get the right response for them. Fast and agile decision making. I think everybody on this call today has experienced their worlds turned upside down probably over the last 12 months, and they've had to make fast and agile decisions about their business, about their family, and I think that the best teams, the best leaders, are able to do that at speed with a high level of confidence as well. Nick, could you just give me an example how that sort of transpires it in your world, and how important it is to be able to be confident in it as a leader to make those decisions in a timely manner?
Yeah, I mean, this is key to everything we do, really. Yeah, I mean, particularly the Air Force prides itself on being agile. And if you think of air, everything is generally fast in air. I think it's key to point out here for us in this environment, it's probably unique actually in some respects, because you just can't physically stop in the airborne environment. You know, you've got to keep, if you stop, you're going to fall out of the sky. So everything is constantly moving. So you have to be really quick in your decision making. You have to be really agile and really reactive a lot of the time. And a lot of that is through training, process, procedure, clear understanding of what you're trying to do, and with probably tied in with a little bit of instinct sometimes as well. But it rolls across everything we do. If we don't make a decision, somebody else will, and it may not be the one that we actually wanted. So we have to be really clear about this, and often probably talk about a bit in a couple of slides time, but kind of living in the future to enable that to happen. Always thinking about the next things. And that's particularly prevalent in my role that I did at Scampton. So as responsible for UK air defence, and I mean, all of you, I'm sure at some point have probably seen news reports of UK Typhoons being scrambled to intercept airliners, and stories like that are often in the press. That was my role, was to get those jets airborne. And we are talking a 10-minute timeline here from receiving a phone call to saying something's not quite right, to getting the jets airborne and getting them overhead wherever they need to be. And that is an incredibly complex process, because I may not even be in the operations room when that happens. So I may be downstairs in the office writing emails, whatever it may be. Likewise, the pilots are sat in a crew room, probably just watching TV or something. And next thing you know, the alarm goes off and you're into this unknown instantly. And you have to be incredibly agile to deal with that, because you don't know where you're going. You don't know what you're going to be asked to do. But there is process and procedure behind those for you to fall back on. But then I have to communicate to my team what I intend to do. I have to communicate that to the pilots. I have to make sure that my team, the controllers, communicate that to the pilots. I have to speak to air traffic to make sure the intent is known for those guys. And that happens within, we're talking minutes, if not seconds here, because it could be so important. And when we talk back about communication, you know, the post 9/11 stuff that, you know, changed the way we operate in the UK in terms of we have to protect ourselves against the same threats, right? So we within the UK, you know, if we were ever to be in that situation, God forbid, you know, the designated authority to give you clearance to, you know, to shoot an airline down would be at the highest levels. You know, you talk about the Prime Minister. When we talk about communication, if he doesn't really, you know, those ministers can't understand air in the same way that we do. And we used to talk to them about, you know, when we trained for these events in the simulator, you know, the aeroplane is now 200 miles away from London, sir. What would you like to do? And to those individuals, 200 miles is a long way away, you know, because they have no concept of that. But what we found was they just take their time, because what they didn't realize was that 200 miles might only actually equate to about 4 minutes before we're in a very dangerous situation. So we had to change the way we communicated to the Prime Minister and the designated authorities to say, look, say you have 1 minute to make a decision. this is what is happening. This is what we think is going to happen. You have 1 minute to make a decision, and change the focus of what they had to do, because they just didn't get the initial way we were communicating. And we had to try and get some fast and agile decision making into those really high profile, capable people, because that's just not situations they've ever been in before.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I think from a business owner, we talk about some of the businesses here today and some of the leaders of those organizations, you know, were the first to reopen up and trade in some really complex and uncertain times to seek advantage. And I think that's, you know, what you're talking about there. You're having to make those fast decisions under pressure to seek that competitive advantage of whatever the enemy threat was in the state of the art that you're facing. And we see that from a business perspective, it's about getting ahead of your competitors. So are you brave enough and bold enough as a leader, you know, once you've created that alignment, you've communicated it, but to be able to make those decisions. And I think even when I reflect back to talking to, you know, Richie McCaw, he said, sometimes as a leader, you've just got to make the decision, and knowing that the team will follow that is good enough. What I'd like to do really is just to, with the people on the call, in terms of your leadership ability, so creating the performance conditions, think about your alignment and clarity of vision. Are your team emotionally connected to it? How have you communicated your plans to stakeholders, suppliers, board of directors, shareholders, that whole sort of grid? And how would you rate yourself as a decision maker? Are you able to make fast and agile decisions? And what I'd like you to do is just to make a note. You can put it in the chat box, scribble it on a piece of paper, just score yourself out of 10 from a leadership capability as building high performing teams. So 0 would be, well, I know nobody's a 0. No one's going to give yourself a 0. 0 would not be good. 5 would be, look, there's definitely things to do. And 10 would be, I'm succeeding at all levels. So just think of a number that works or feels about right for you. And all I want you to do is then just to think about, what is the one thing I could do to take my number from a 6 to a 7 or a 3 to a 4 to enable us, enable me as a leader to get to the next level. Again, you can put that into a chat box or just write that down, whatever you feel is the right thing for you. And we'll definitely sort of explore that as we come back. I'm not going to ask Nick to score himself. I'm sure he'd give himself a 10, knowing his personality. Nick. So listen, Nick, obviously once we've set the scene as a leader for the high performance team, so we've created the vision, we've created where we're going, how we're going to deliver it, we've communicated it, all important things. As a commander, you're talking about being 2 steps ahead, so always staying ahead of your competition, so you're living in the future. But actually, once we've created that first part of the wheel and the cog, and we've created the right relationships, the next bit is we've got to be able to manage the performance of the team, right? And you know, we talk about clear roles and responsibilities, a culture of accountability, and also just collaboration, not competition. So I guess creating and celebrating success as we go, because that helps us build momentum. Could you just talk a little bit about just the roles and responsibilities, because you are delivering this output in complex environments, and obviously very diverse teams, different language barriers. How important is the process and how you systemize that for the team to your output?
Yeah, it's huge, really. I think, you know, we wouldn't be able to deliver the effect we're trying to deliver if we didn't have clearly defined roles, responsibilities, processes in place that are constantly revisited every time we fly, because you know, the strain you are under for such periods of time, you just wouldn't be able to deliver what you needed to. So we will set out clear roles and responsibilities for each member of the team. They will know their place, they will know what's expected of them, but we'll never be scared to deviate from those if we need to as well. And it comes back to the kind of the agile, fast and agile decision making. We have to change those roles and responsibilities real time. But you know, we will plan what we're going to do. Some roles and responsibilities will just become standard. Others we will revisit and change as the situation dictates and the mission dictates. But everyone should step, and I hope they've always stepped, certainly when I've been leading, with a clear understanding of what their role and responsibility is. And briefing your team and communicating within that planning process is really key to that, and being clear in all of your communication. Because I have found that a lot of people say, yeah, I understand the task, I understand what you're asking me to do. And then you ask them a question, they can't answer it. And actually, some people are sometimes a little bit scared to say that they don't understand. You've got to empower your team or make them feel like they can ask questions. And I think we talked last week recently about changing briefing styles. And, I certainly, as my time, particularly during the Libya type mission, I changed the way I briefed my team significantly. because I found actually I wasn't being as clear as I thought I was being. And actually, rather than me briefing my team now, I got them to brief me instead. And so I could have a good understanding of what they thought was required of them and what they were going to do. And actually, it gave me an opportunity to realign them, send them in a different direction, and just have confidence that they really understood what they were going out there to do and that I could trust them. Because trust is two ways, I think. Your team have got to trust you, but you've also got to trust them as well.
Definitely. I think one of the areas I've certainly experienced with some leaders is they find it more challenging to hold people to account because they feel it becomes personal because they don't do it enough. And I think if you go back to the old ways of performance management, you'd have an appraisal every 12 months, or you'd have maybe a check-in every 6 months, which doesn't create this culture of accountability. How do you do it in your world, Nick? Because I think accountability is really, really important. Leader, we set the expectations, but we have to hold people to account in terms of how they're delivering, because it's the only way we can really improve and generate high levels of performance within the team. So how do you do that in your world, Nick?
So I think kind of the accountability and the celebration of success, which we would probably call a debrief, are very similar things for us. I mean, we tend to measure our success in the air environment generally by time in a lot of ways. The Afghanistan stuff, we would aim to have air support overhead within 7 minutes of being asked to deliver that effect, because the guys, they come under fire from the Taliban, whoever it may have been, and they need some help, and we would pride ourselves on getting that overhead within 7 minutes. And we fall back to those processes and roles and responsibilities to enable us to be really efficient and to achieve the right effects, because there's a huge amount of stuff that goes into moving aeroplanes around the sky, making sure they're properly supported with fuel and weapons, and there's no gap in coverage. Because the last thing the guys want on the ground is to get some air overhead, have some effect, then they go off station because they run out of fuel and there's a gap for half an hour. And there's an ongoing task here, and that only becomes efficient and slick through people understanding clear roles and responsibilities, knowing they're accountable for their actions as well, because I've empowered individuals to do that for me and make sure they know what they're doing. But it goes back to that emotional tie, I suppose, in operations. They're emotionally involved with it. They want to strive. And a lot of times, the self-debriefing part of that, they hold themselves to account in many ways. Sometimes I don't have to do that. They will thrash themselves if they think they've got something wrong sometimes, or didn't do it as well as they could have done. That's
really interesting, Nick, because definitely when we've spoken to, even just slightly off subject with some of the Rugby Centurions, the high performance always starts with them. So it's about, delivering, self-service, your best of your ability every single day, which then generates everybody else's ability within the team as well. And I think that debrief, so we've spoke about this sort of root cause analysis that, if we put it into the business speak, if we've lost a client or a customer, or a relationship has broken down with a supplier, or we've lost out to a competitor, actually taking the time there and then to understand why, so that we can learn from it. So going to seek feedback from a business perspective around your clients, customers, stakeholders is actually really, really important, because that enables us to learn and ultimately develop as we're going forward. And I think you were talking about on your operations, you do a 12-hour operation and then it's almost, immediate into quite a hot debrief in terms of, okay, what's happened? What's the root cause? What do we do next time? And does that really help you bond as a team, but also really, I guess, drive performance from a management perspective?
Yeah, I mean, anybody certainly in the air environment will tell you that the mission success is all decided in the debrief, not how you feel at the time. We pride ourselves on debriefing for sometimes hours and hours over, maybe on a 3-hour mission, we'll debrief for longer than the actual mission itself and break it down, because nothing ever goes well 100% of the time, but it's understanding why those things went well and why they didn't go so well. And actually, we probably focus too much in the military on the negatives, but it's because we have to strive to get better and we have to make it clear. And the one thing we found is that, root cause analysis, as you say, is really important, because often you don't, say, you put a proposal forward for a contract, whatever it may be, you didn't win it and it's, the bid wasn't good enough. Done, debrief done. Actually, it's not as simple as that. And we go right down to the real bare basics of what went wrong. And quite often we find that it's the smallest thing, typically a miscommunication or a misunderstanding of an email can have the biggest effect. And there's an example that I'll give you is, on an exercise in the US. It's a huge US exercise. It's probably the biggest, most known exercise, called Exercise Red Flag. And it's actually based out of Las Vegas. It's a terrible exercise to have to participate in.
Yeah.
It's awful, but you get airborne, and you do. The Americans pride themselves on that this exercise will give you your first 10 combat missions. It's going to give you stretch. It's going to make you question yourself, question your processes and everything else. And within that, there was a blue aircraft within the terms of the exercise shot another blue aircraft down, which is and
just for those people on the call, blue on blue, just give me 10 seconds
on
that.
So blue on blue effectively is friendly aircraft shooting down another friendly aircraft by mistake. Okay, it's the worst mistake you could make in the air environment. And the Americans pride themselves on not doing this kind of thing. And in the exercise simulated, he would have shot down his one of his teammates effectively. And it was my last ever mission in the RAF as well. So, and I was the commander for that mission. So I had to debrief that mission in front of 150 aircrew and why it went wrong. It's a pretty lonely place on the stage of 150 guys having to review why it went wrong and what it went wrong. And the blame was being pretty firmly put in our court. It was one of our guys that had made a mistake. And, the pilot that made the mistake, he actually stood up and said, "No, you got it wrong. It was me." He took ownership of his mistake and he debriefed why he made the mistake. And I think everyone went, "Okay, yeah, that's fine. We'll put that to bed now. It's done." And actually, we went away and did some root cause analysis. And it actually turned out that it was our mistake in the end, which was pretty disappointing, but we learned some pretty big lessons about it. And I think that's the key to the debrief, or whatever you do. Unless you learn something, you haven't learned anything, and you will make the same mistakes again. It just turned out it was a simple thing that we were told about that we didn't communicate to anybody else. And if we'd communicated that problem, it probably wouldn't have happened. And it was a huge eye-opener for us. And for the Americans, if you do that in an exercise, you have to buy the guy who shot down a bottle of Jack Daniels and send his wife some flowers.
Reinforce that learning.
Reinforce the learning point.
But I think the bit that I'm taking away from that, and I think for everybody on here, is actually this is not a personal attack. This is about just being extremely professional about understanding, what's gone wrong. And then actually, I know you sort of said as well in those social circles, celebrating the bits that you do get right as well. So I think for everybody on the call here today, if we look at management now, so really important that you're able to see and measure performance. That might be KPIs across your business. Have the people in your teams got clear roles and responsibilities? Have you got clear working practices between suppliers and other stakeholders? Are you holding your team to account? Are they delivering to the best of their ability? Because if you don't create that culture of accountability, they simply won't perform. And do you celebrate success? Do you celebrate those milestones on that journey so we build a momentum and a culture of success as we go? Again, score yourself out of 10 from a performance perspective. And then if you are in that mid-range or that bottom range, think about what's the one thing you could do to take you from a 5 to a 6 or a 7 to 8 to really improve the way you manage performance in your business. Because if you can't see performance in your business and what's happening to your business, then we're not going to be able to understand it. We're not going to get to the root cause, and then we cannot improve. And the best teams are really, really nailed on in terms of how they manage performance in their teams to create that right environment. Coaching is definitely a big thing, obviously, here at the partnership. But also really important about creating this sort of future capability. And this goes back to not working in the business all the time. So it's about working on the business and developing the future capability. So can you step away from your business today, go on holiday for 2 weeks, and actually everything still performs to the best of its ability because you've created the right conditions for the future success of the business. 3 things that Nick and I feel quite strongly about is this getting people out of your comfort zone. And I'm going to ask Nick just to explain a little bit about that in a minute, about buying you back personal capacity. This for me is really important because what you'll have noticed, I think, during the pandemic is that rules, policies, processes, procedures, clients' behaviors, stakeholders, challenges have all come to the fore in a matter of days and weeks and continually changed. And you have to have the ability to be able to offload and delegate and empower people within your team to run the routine tasks so that actually you've got the capacity to deal with those issues that are coming on a day-to-day basis. If you're working so in your business that you're doing everything, you cannot deal with the unknown and the uncertainty. It makes it so challenging for you. So you have to be able to empower other people in your organization and allow them an opportunity to make some mistakes, so that you can deal with what's really important in that environment. And it's that capacity that you need as a business owner to be able to make fast and agile decision making, because actually when we reach our capacity, our ability to be able to respond to the environment becomes much lower. And this is the bit I just want to explore with Nick over the next 5 or 6 minutes. Nick, I want you to talk really about how important training is for you and stretching the mindset and the capability of your team, so that actually when they get into a place of delivery and operations, when it's real, it's live, they deliver at their very best.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's key to find we're on operations. We're probably operating at about 95% capacity all of the time. Yeah, and I think our longest mission was 16 hours, and 16 hours of 95% capacity is draining, right? So we have to grow the people so they can cope with that kind of pressure for long periods. And the only way to do that is to, I think, you've got to know the individuals. I think that's really key, understanding who works for you, what motivates them, what drives them, how to interact with them, because everybody is different. And then adding a little bit more pressure, just a little bit of time to put them into a bit more stretch. And over time, you find the capacity in that individual grows significantly. Now that's difficult to do in operations, because people's lives are at risk here. So we tend to do it in training. And what I would do is I'll just hand off some of my tasks in training to those guys that I trusted that were capable of a little bit more. It made them feel empowered. It gave them something new to focus on. And it really started to develop their individual skills and capabilities. Now in operations, personal capacity for me was always a challenge, because I've trained all of these guys that are sat around me. I'm responsible for their output. I'm responsible for them as individuals. But often I would find that I was the one suffering from a lack of capacity, and across the team, we'd have to revisit those roles and responsibilities so I could free up my own capacity to be able to support the guys that are sat around me that are actually delivering the effect. As I said, I'm kind of living in the future, trying to make sure they're prepared, they're resourced, that I'm anticipating problems and dealing with them. But I can only do that if I free up enough capacity, because I have tasks to do as well. So we would revisit roles and responsibilities. We'd be agile in our approach to what we were doing to allow me to support everybody. And almost in some respect, you are the leader, but sometimes you're almost on a par with the guys that are working for you, because you're just supporting them. A lot of missions, I was just supporting the guys around me and then just stepping up to make those critical decisions. So
almost coaching, facilitating, asking questions of the people delivering the output for you. So again, you're creating that resilience and skill level within the team, because I guess you don't want that bottleneck where they have to come to Nick for the answer, and it's actually
exactly
sort of flipping it the other way.
I mean, that is key, because what happens when you've got to ask someone for a decision, you're just taking somebody else's capacity as well as freeing. You could even do another task for asking that question. So empower them to make decisions and earn the decision is fine. And that comes down to the bottom point. I pride myself in, being a capable guy in the air, and I can allow the guys to learn by making mistakes as long as I'm comfortable with what they are doing. So there's always a point where we will never go beyond, and I'll let the guys tread that path until I am uncomfortable now, and I'm going to bring it back. And normally that's around a safety point, but I can tell a guy, don't do that because it'll go wrong. He doesn't learn anything. Let him tread that path a little bit and see the outcome of what he was doing. And he will understand it a million times. Well, I'll never make that mistake again. Now, again, in operations, we typically wouldn't do that. But on training, absolutely, I would let him to the last possible moment. But you have to have confidence in yourself as a leader, and the team has to have confidence in you as well. But you instill that confidence by doing all the things we've just talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. You talk about it really well in terms of the leader almost living in the future, being 2 steps ahead. Managing performance is the here and now, isn't it? And actually you're developing this capability behind you to be the future of your business. So it's like a 3-pronged approach, but all really important pieces of the wheel, all all developed, I think, by the relationships that we have with the people that we are working with. And that's the fundamental bit that sort of links, you know, the leadership, the management, and the coaching. If I could ask everybody again, off final thing, just on the coaching perspective, again, score yourself out of 10. So are you developing the future capability of your people within your business? Are you allowing them to fail? Are you training them? Are you giving them enough resource and education? Are you asking enough questions? Are you stepping away from the detail? And again, give yourself a score out of 10 and look to increase that by 1. What's the one thing that you could do to empower your team and create future capability of the people within your business? We're coming to an end now, and I'll hand back over to David, and we can open the floor to any questions either to myself or, probably more importantly on this, Nick, in terms of some of his experiences, but just some final things to consider. So as a leader, are you creating the optimum performance environment? So think about that alignment, that clarity, how you're communicating to your team. Are you able to make fast and agile decisions as a leader, especially in these unpredictable environments? How are you managing performance in your business? Do you have a culture of accountability? Are you able to set those expectations and challenge people over the performance, utilizing your KPIs or your indicators that you've set? And are you creating a future for your business? Are you identifying and winning talent? And I think one bit that, you know, we could definitely talk about as an added is, you know, you have to find to win the best people. And that comes from that coaching perspective as well. So recruiting the right people into your organization that you think have got an ability to be coached, that you can develop that talent so they could be the person looking after your business in 5 or 10 years' time is really, really important. Now, the challenge as a business owner is that sometimes, especially when you're starting up and the team might not be that huge, is it does become very situational. So on some occasions, we have to have our leadership hat on and be very directive in terms of the direction we're going and creating that vision and alignment. The next day, it may well have to have that manager cap on and really deep dive down into the KPIs to drive that accountability and performance. And the next day, it may be about developing the capability within your people in your team. And it's about making that decision in terms of what you need to do as a leader within your business that will drive the output of the team as well. I've really enjoyed, Nick. Thank you very much for your time and answering some of the questions and sharing your expertise. I'm going to stop sharing my slides and hand back over to you, David. Thank you very much.
Hey, Chris and Nick, that was fantastic. I've written so many notes, but let's go to some of the questions that we've got on the chat box. And guys, if you've got any questions, stick them in the chat box now, and we'll go through them. But the first one is from Alan McIntosh, which is about how do you emotionally connect employees? And his question is vision or purpose, which is the more powerful in terms of being able to emotionally connect employees? So Chris or Nick, who wants to take that one?
Would you like me to, do you want to go for it, Nick?
Yeah, I'll answer that one. I mean, for us, certainly, it's almost 50-50, really. I mean, everything we do, there is a vision of what we're aiming to achieve, and actually everyone has a purpose and a role within that. But I think the more you give individuals a purpose, the more you will see an increase in performance because they feel responsible for the outcome. If they just have a purpose, then I think you'll find that the performance will drop.
Great. Next question is from Sarah Wilson. So she has a lot of long-standing staff. So people have been with her for a long time. But her question is, how do you now raise the bar to a new level of performance for this new environment for long-standing staff who've probably got into a habit of a certain level of performance, and therefore raising the bar is more challenging? How do we do that with long-standing employees?
Yeah, I think this is always quite a challenging area, Sarah, especially as Nick and I were talking about, as a business grows and develops, how you then take it from point X to point Y in so much of words. But I think that then links strongly back to the purpose and the emotional connection. So what's in it for them? What's the reason to actually drive that performance? And I think, there's many good businesses, I think now are creating, yes, they've got their product and their output, but they're aligning themselves to, a cleaner environment, sustainability. They're giving a reason why for them to want to be able to perform better at work. And for me, I think there's also a part to play in the jigsaw that actually if they're not performing and can't meet your expectations and standards in terms of where you want to drive your business to, then they're also not probably the right people for your business. And you do have to have a mix of talent. So we have to have our operators that are performing and very steady, and then we need to try and find the right people to invest the talent in. We can't coach everybody across the business to look after your organization going forward, but there may be one or two people that you can invest in that will drive the performance of the team. But me, it's coming back to that emotional connection. If we can get to their root cause, what's in it for them? Why should they be invested in improving their performance? What are they going to get out of it? What's it going to make a difference to the business? And we can tie those and thread those together, then actually you'll see an improvement in performance. I hope that answers your question, Sarah.
Thank you. Sarah's smiling, so that is a yes, I think. So this is another question from Josh Huggins. So how do you go about building and maintaining culture and environment in remote teams when clearly you're not seeing people physically? So how do you create culture and environment in that scenario?
Nick, do you want to talk about that from your perspective in the air, and I can jump in as well?
Well, yeah, I'll kind of touch on it from what we do now as well. So what I did mention at the start was I now work for a defence company, and we employ high-end ex-military individuals, and we deliver simulated training environments to put people into those situations we've kind of discussed. So put them into stretch, put them into complex decision-making cycles airborne, to try and coach them and mentor them so that when they go on operations, they can draw on something. It's not the first time they've experienced something, if you like. And actually, that's kind of how we do. We have remote teams that are all around the country operating, and standards and culture are really important about what we do. We pride ourselves in what we do now on our high standards of delivery, of training outcomes and debriefing, to make sure that the trainee gets the most out of it. Now, in remote teams, that's difficult because you don't always know if your intent is going to be communicated properly, or there's high standards are going to maintain. But actually, we have a process in place where those remote teams are visited quite frequently, and we have a great feedback cycle, and we regularly review our output to make sure we're maintaining high standards. Now, in the airborne environment, that's a little bit different, but the culture is built from the ground up, really. It's what your business is about, I think. And certainly Air Force, there's a culture about in the air, we are 100% professional 100% of the time. And if guys don't deliver that, then you just have to deal with it in the debrief, I suppose, Chris. I suppose is the easiest answer. It's harsh sometimes in the military because you have to be. And I guess that doesn't always work in for businesses and stuff, but you just have to breed the culture and make everyone sure everyone buys in it by empowering them, and all the things Chris just spoke about will get you that. Will make sure your culture endures, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think it probably comes from certainly what I've experienced in terms of remote teams over the pandemic is an understanding of the environment and space that person's operating in. I think everybody's had a different experience over the last 12 months where they've managing complexities of home, family illness, children at home, working hours have changed. And I think you have to be really adaptable to that. So from a cultural perspective, Nick's right, you set the standards in terms of what's expected, and you explain the why, why we're here and what's our purpose. But sometimes the how, the way you can create that culture, is enabling them to be able to deliver against that in space of their own environment because of the challenges that they receive at home. So as long as the why and the standards are met, how they do that and how they go about their work on a day-to-day basis, you can give that empowerment and I guess accountability to them personally.
Yeah, I think to build on that as well, obviously what's happening in the business cycle is demand is now going back up again. So what a lot of you guys, I know you guys are doing, is employing new people. But of course, it's not possible for them to come into that and feel that environment in the same way as they did before because they're joining a virtual environment. So I guess the other question is how do you induct and immerse people into the culture and the standards of an organization when actually they're not actually physically connected to those people, they're only virtually connected to those people. So I guess the other challenge, good to have a discussion, is how do we induct people into that environment and get them up to a performance standards just through virtual communication? That's a question.
It's a question.
Is that a question to the floor or to Nick and I, David?
That's a question to Nick and you, Chris. That's a question.
Nick and me. Look, I think there's no doubt it's been more and more challenging. And I think it takes longer and you have to put a bit more time into that recruitment process. I think that's really important. I know there's certainly some business owners that have, hired fast in these times and ultimately paid the price because they're trying to match the output to the people they've got in the team. So I do think it's about finding the person that is culturally fit for your business. And I would also look to employ somebody that has a greater culture fit or greater culture add than maybe the skills or experience that they have in comparison, because I think you can always teach skills and knowledge in terms of how the business runs and how you want them to perform around standards, but actually you can't teach and bring in from a cultural perspective. So actually getting that decision process right in terms of the recruitment process, David, is absolutely critical. And then you have to invest more time, because in the office space, in terms of the cup of coffee that you could have, or the water cooler moment, or the beer after work, that social environment has gone. And I know teams across the world have spent times, and I know you guys have shared with this on the call in the past, your quizzes, the extra 5 or 10 minutes just at the start of the conversation to understand the scenarios, and taking a little bit more time with those colleagues, especially as they enter the business, is really, really important. But for me, fundamentally, you've got to look at that recruitment process to start with, to make sure we're bringing the right people into the organization, and then you are going to have to take additional amounts of time to then bind them. But look, I would strongly recommend, as we come out of this, many people can realize they can work remote now, and remote's a great thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But do create that regular routine of being able to spend face-to-face time with your team as well, where possible, because for me, that enables, if you think of the communication triangle, the quicker we can get to a higher level of rapport as a team, as individuals, then we feel more comfortable. If we're more comfortable with each other, we're going to be able to take more risk, we're going to be able to empower each other, and we're going to perform to better levels. And the quicker we can do that and build those relationships will determine the success of the team.
Right, I'd just like to add to that, the R in the center of our model, which is relationships. Because as a leader and a manager, you don't have a license to coach somebody, to manage somebody, to lead somebody, unless you have a strong relationship with them. So actually, time you spend not talking about business, just building that relationship, is absolutely a legitimate use of your time. Because if you can't build those relationships, you can't lead, you can't manage, and you can't coach. So I think in a virtual environment, just spending enough time just chatting, building relationships, building that bond, I think, is critical in this environment, absolutely critical, because otherwise you're not going to be an effective manager, leader, or coach.
Just one thing I'd like to add. I know it's been a big conversation on one thing, but I think we also need to remember that we're not around people, so people can't copy our behaviours and our style and our standards. So extra training really has to go into what are our standards, how do we speak to people on the phone, how do we follow up, because client service delivery is going to drop and businesses are going to get in trouble. So relationship absolutely key, but behaviours and standards that people can pick up in the office environment, they can't do that virtually.
Great point, Joe. Thanks for that. So it's getting to the end of our time. Nick, a massive thanks to you for joining us. Fascinating, all your examples, and really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed it too.
No, it was fantastic. Thank you.
And Chris, thank you very much for running the session. Great stuff. Really, really great stuff.
No problems, David. Thank you.
So the next session is on April the 23rd, which is financial mastery. So that's all about understanding your numbers, and more importantly, how to craft the financial model of your business so you can make money easily rather than making it too much like hard work. So that's on April the 23rd. So thanks so much for coming today. Thanks for participating. Thanks for your questions. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you on April the 23rd. Bye, guys.